policy fundamentals underpin private sector adaptability. If we were still in a world with very big share of the public sector in the economy, as it used to be in the Gulf, as it used to be in my part of the world, that adaptability would have been missing. So my first message to everybody in this audience is, at a time of very high uncertainty, you need agility and adaptability, and the private sector is so much more capable of delivering it. Of course, it doesn't mean that the private sector would always get it right, and this is why having good data to give a sense of where we are headed, good institutions that can be there to make sure that there is a level playing field and that there is predictability of what regulations would look like. This all matters tremendously. But if I am to go back to my personal history, and you mentioned I was born in Bulgaria, I grew up in a non-market economy, I can tell everybody here, doesn't work, ain't gonna work, to have central decision making and a oversized public sector role. So what do we want for the private sector? Three things. One, clarity in the regulatory environment, not too much, not too little. Two, access to finance, and this is where the whole story of governments bringing down deficits matters so much, because if they don't do it, they're pushing up interest rates up for the private sector included. And three, we need the ability of small companies to grow. And in far too many places, if you are a small company, you're stuck between the big guys. And in so many places, failure is not treated kindly. The United States has the advantage of saying, hey, you know, I fell off the cliff, I dust myself up, I go again. But in many, many places, the laws do not clean the economy from that wood. So companies start, fail, and then they're stuck. So there is a lot. Actually, when I talk about regulatory house cleaning, I mean it. There is a lot we need to do to create this enabling environment. Why? Because uncertainty is here to stay, and we need the agility of the private sector to bolster growth prospects.
So you mentioned something. Many of the stories, of the 1,000 stories that you can see in the center, of the uniqueness of why they came to the United States was they had a chance, a second chance, a third chance. And as we look at the leading technology companies today in the world, most of their leaders had a failure before they had success. And I think that really underlines, and as we step back and look at, if we look at the United States, as you just pointed out, there were more than 50 million jobs created by small and medium businesses in the last 30 years of the 20th century, and minus 4 million jobs by large companies. So I think you've stressed this importance of entrepreneurism. We're sitting here today, you and I, in this building, across from the White House and the Treasury. Both have been quite active in pushing their agendas, as we all know. We've seen new tariffs, tax incentives, shift in trade alliances, all while deficits and debt are rising. Can this mix support long-term growth? And you've already told us no. Where do we go from here?
Look, I mean, it is there is a beautiful saying that the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So let's eat some more, and then we can answer this question. What I see in the United States is a recognition that the world we had before has become unsustainable. For many reasons, and we can argue, are they right reasons, are they wrong reasons? But what is happening is not a capricious move. It is a response to the fact that far too many people felt disfranchised. Is the way this is being addressed the right one? Let's collect more data, and we actually are going to have an in-depth engagement with US authorities towards the end of this year. We will talk more about what works, what we think can be done differently. I want to zero in on one issue where I don't think there is disagreement, and this is the issue of the size of the deficit. I don't think there are many people who would stand up and say, hey, large deficit is beautiful, let's have more of it. So the question is, how do we deal with it? Because it is a very important signal, including to the private sector, that there is a path to reduce the deficit. What are the ways to do it? One, grow more. At this point, we have seen a very resilient growth story in the United States. Would it hold? And there we are looking at the incoming data. There may be some softening. The very fact that the Federal Reserve decided to cut interest rates in the balance between inflation and growth shows that there is that softening. So more to generate impetus for growth, certainly important. Two, look at the balance of revenues and expenditures with a rational rather than emotional eye. And there I think we all could see, I talked about one aspect of tax policy that could be steps to be taken. But the third step is the most important and the most difficult one. Carry people with you. Get people to understand that ballooning deficit and more public spending, not necessarily good for them. And that is where I see it across, not just in the United States, everywhere. We still haven't figured out how to do that, how to bring people with us on things that are tough. In my part of the world, in Central and Eastern Europe, we have had examples of brave leaders doing very difficult stuff, cutting pensions and wages by 40–50% and being re-elected. Why? Because they carried people with them. There is confidence that needed to be done. We now look at Argentina. Argentina is taking a very dramatic adjustment program forward. The success is going to be based on carrying people with you. So I hope that if they are American, are there Americans in the audience? I mean, we are international community, but I hope they are. I hope that you guys are taking this. We need to carry people with us to solve a problem that otherwise is going to hang on our neck and drag the economic growth down.
So the ideal 17, 18 years ago when we were thinking of building a center for advancing this ideal of the American dream was really we looked at three groups. One, those who believe they've achieved their dream. Two, those that believe they're on their way to that dream. And the third, those that believe they cannot achieve their dream. And this center was primarily focused on the third group, to give you hope in the stories of others that occurs. And I think when you talk about the challenge of youth, this is obviously one of the keys. And in the other room, there was a a documentary many, many years ago, more than 30 years ago, with Maya Angelou, and she said the same things you've said today, Kristalina. She said she doesn't think you can achieve your dream unless you bring others along with you on that dream.
Yep.
So this rebalancing that you talk about cannot be the U.S. alone. What roles do you see for China and Europe in this process? You gave us an outline. What policy actions are the most important today?
Yeah. Well, the world today is, of course, different from when it was 5 years ago, before the pandemic, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And one thing that I tell my team, I tell our members, is look forward. It would be a big mistake to be nostalgic for the days we lived in and pray. Don't waste your dream for going back. Think about going forward. And there, of course, there are very important pillars of global growth and stability. China is one, the EU is one. And I saw on the map, in this coming up, we have regions of the world like the Gulf, ASEAN countries that are showing a dynamism that we should be talking more about. But going to China, I mean, China is in a place where, from top to bottom, from the decision makers to ordinary people, they understand that the growth model they relied on cannot be sustained, that they need to switch to consumption-driven growth model. But doing so is not easy, and it takes time. And when I go to China, actually what impresses me more than the growth numbers, the inflation or disinflation risk, what impresses us more is that we have a whole country of 1.4 billion people that is now seeing their fortunes changing. They were a country that for 4 decades knew only one thing: up, up, up. Growth up, standard of living up, wages up, job opportunities up, entrepreneurship opportunities up. And now they're turning into what I would say a normal country, a country that goes up, goes down. The adjustment, especially of the young people in China, to this normal place for China. You know, other economies have gone on this way. This is not an easy adjustment, and I think again, more talking about what can and must be done and mobilizing the doing is necessary. And there we have one fixation, and it is get an economic policy in place that reflects today's realities. And again, I want to repeat myself, there is a recognition in China that the export growth model is no more viable, but it is not easy to switch to consumption. In Europe, so Europe is such a wonderful place. In my former job at the World Bank, we wrote a report about Europe in which we classified Europe as a lifestyle superpower. It's wonderful to live in Europe. I remember coming from East Coast, from the World Bank, to be a commissioner, and asking my team to plan the year. So they came up with the calendar, and the calendar had all these red spots. I said, what is this? Oh, Easter vacation, summer vacation, Christmas vacation. So I said, look, where I come from, we actually plan our vacations around work, not work around our vacations. So Europe, this is, if you ask me, what is the biggest challenge for Europe? The biggest challenge for Europe is to get into this reality that They have pressure to spend more on defense. Russia's war in Ukraine has been devastating, with significant consequences on public spending in Europe. They have to create more space for private companies, especially small companies, venture capital to come, to grow. And they have to recognize that there would be some sacrifices on the way. They have to adapt to this new reality. But let me say, Europe, the biggest thing, the most wonderful thing about Europe is that Europe has this incredible project of integrating 27 economies. They may grow to be more. In parentheses, Europe is dating again the UK, so the divorcee is kind of coming closer. They have a beautiful opportunity to do better. And it is my conviction that Europe can be a competitive force, a driver of growth for them and the rest of the world, but they have to overcome this tradition of, we don't have to spend much on defense, we can take long vacations. This time is kind of over. Sorry, where are my European friends here?
Well,
my family is in Europe, so what I'm saying, I feel it in my heart.
Well, I think anyone that knows you, Kristalina, knows what you're saying is always in your heart. So you spoke about the challenges we have, and obviously China, where they've gone from having 30 million children born a year to 9. At these levels, they're going to lose half their population in this period of time. Dramatic change. And today there's 200 million more children in India than there is in China today. But for more than 2 decades at the Milken Institute, we've been focused on the idea, we've talked about China, we've talked about Germany, we've talked about Europe, we've talked about the United States, but it might not make any difference what we've done if we don't create opportunities in sub-Saharan Africa. So 19 of the 20 countries with the highest birth rate are in sub-Saharan Africa. They're projecting population growth of 1 to 2 billion more people on that part of the world. And I know one of the things you've been focusing in a world of aging societies and very young populations. How should we think about economies for creating jobs for 1 billion to young people? And how can we encourage more sustainable capital flows to these countries?
This is what my friend and colleague Ajay Banga is concentrating the work of the World Bank entirely. How to create jobs for young people in the developing world where population is growing. And of course at the fund we also work on this because it gets into macroeconomic and financial stability for the countries themselves and through spillover to their neighbors and the rest of the world. It is really very simple as an image. We have people here in Africa, in India, although India is also going to see their demographic shifting, but okay, we have people here and we have capital there. Capital is in the north, the people are in the south. How do we build a bridge for capital to go from here to there? And I don't have a silver bullet for Africa. It is hard work. Countries have to make themselves more trustworthy with rule of law, with strong governance, with institutions that bring confidence. But most importantly, and perhaps even more difficult than this, they need to work together. Today, Africa is being put in one big pot in the eyes of many investors. So something wrong goes in one place, say Sudan falls off the cliff it throws off investor appetite for the whole of Africa. So that I know that institutions in Africa see it, but they have to see it more clearly. They have to work very hard at continental level to get that sense that they help each other and they press each other. It is not any more viable to have a country in Africa deciding to go for a coup and then destroy the institutions, and the neighbors to say, well, that's not good, to, you know, poo, why are you doing it, but not actively engaging to correct it. As long as we can lift up the image of those economies that are doing the right thing. I mean, Africa has countries with 25% plus tax to GDP ratio, with very dynamic entrepreneurial culture. Get this to be dominant, but that requires engaging with others. Not good enough to focus on only on your own country, on your backyard.
So when we think about some of the lessons you've taught us today, when I think about India, India has more children 18 and under than people that live in Europe. Mm-hmm. They have more children 18 and under than live in the United States plus Mexico. And I noticed in your discussion you talked about accelerated growth and significant growth in India. So you've given us a roadmap for the United States, you've given us a roadmap for China, you've given us a roadmap for Europe. What's your roadmap for India?
Well, India, the most impressive thing India has done is policy reforms, tax reform, making it simpler. The digital infrastructure, which is public, it allows everybody to tap in and benefit from it. I think India needs to stay that course of reforming the economy and of course, like everywhere else, make sure that the small companies, the entrepreneurial spirit of startups is given space to flourish. I am very a bit on India because of this boldness with which they do things that others are telling them not possible. For example, digital identity. India, everybody was saying you cannot have everybody with digital ID, this number, this system that you're promoting, it's not going to work. They have proven them wrong, so it's working. And then they use this boldness to build competitiveness on top of it by having the public digital infrastructure that allows digital payments. I mean, it's amazing. You walk in a rural India, nobody's using cash. How did that happen? One of the steps that Prime Minister Modi took was to say, I'm going to suck out small notes, only big notes, and that's it. You cannot have small notes anymore. People were saying, oh, terrible, the economy is going to go down. For a short period of time, there was a bit of slowdown. But the overall impact is digital payments are predominant. They're much, much more acceptable in society. So you have digital ID, public digital infrastructure, no small fiat money anymore in circulation, and all of a sudden payment cost goes down, entrepreneurial capacity shoots up, and the results are seen in the growth trajectory of India.
So one last question before we open it to the floor to ask questions. I gave a talk about 6 years ago on entrepreneurship with some of the leaders in Africa, and 4 million people came to listen to a discussion on entrepreneurs. Nigeria was the largest group. What policies or financial innovations can help broaden access and support these entrepreneurs? What can be done that we can bring access. You talked about capital going from north to south. Are there any other last-minute suggestions you would make?
There is this bridge, but there is also the channels, the flows inside the country. Hugely important to make it possible for local bond markets to work. Then you get local savings, fueling growth, and when you put the parameters that favor the small entrepreneur, then you can have a big boost domestically. For far too long, we talked a lot about foreign direct investments and not enough about local investments, local bond markets. And I think this is now rightly changing. And I think that you would see the fund in our engagement with countries working very hard to make it so that domestic savings can flow into entrepreneurial activities with return on the investment domestically.
So let's take a couple questions from our distinguished audience. We have one over here.
Rachel Glenister, President of the Centre for Global Development. So debt and debt service is rising in low, middle and high income countries. I'm interested to hear where you are most concerned and also what you think the prospects are for sustainable improvements on debt rather than some of the short-term fixes that we've seen, for example, in Zambia, which is heralded as a success, but I think is relatively short-term fix.
Excellent question. So when you look at the debt dynamics, in the world, public debt is growing faster in advanced economies, in emerging market economies. Actually, it is going down in low-income countries. But it is going down only because they are so constrained and their ability to tap into markets is so restricted. It is not going down as a positive trend. So when you ask me where I'm most concerned, frankly, I'm very concerned about high debt levels in some advanced economies. Not only because debt is sucking up financial resources and pushing up interest rates also for the private sector, but because we cannot anymore justify the excessive debt levels when the reasons for these debt levels to go up is no more there. As you know, they went up mostly during and after COVID and because of the cost of living crisis that was triggered by the impact of COVID, but most importantly by Russia's war. So these countries, they have to have the strength to come up with medium-term fiscal consolidation plans and then implement them. We are not asking countries to go chop right away. We are saying, give yourself a couple of years, but then follow that path of fiscal consolidation. For low-income countries, and actually to everybody, we say, good debt management. I mean, for God's sake, look at your maturities. If you can do something to adjust your portfolio, do it. And we are very much in favor of competent and decisive debt management offices. For low-income countries, their problem is really very dramatic because their debt service obligations are sucking away the very limited fiscal space they have for their own people. And there we have two avenues for concrete action. One, we call it the three-pillar approach. countries that are where debt is sustainable, but they face liquidity problems. So act on three fronts. Act on your domestic fiscal position, act with your partners of borrowing that is well tailored to your needs, and then make sure that you attract more private sector investment. And then we have the restructuring cases. And in restructuring cases, frankly, the biggest problem I see today is just accepting you need to restructure your debt. And there, very often, countries, for good reasons, they say, we worked so hard to have access to markets. You're telling us restructure, meaning we're thrown out of there. But the faster you act, the better. We have created the Global Sovereign Debt Roundtable. It helps us to come up with more comprehensive approach to debt restructuring. We issued in April a rule book for debt restructuring, finally defining steps and timelines. And it really is a matter of using the will to act in a timely manner. You drag your feet, it only gets worse.
So we have time for one more question? Two more questions. Okay, thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Mary Lovely from the Peterson Institute for International Economics. I want to ask a question about divergence within countries. So in the two largest economies in the world, the United States and China, we have buoyant capital markets, but stagnating labor markets. In the United States, we call this the divergence between Main Street and Wall Street. Isn't this divergence a risk to medium-term growth? I mean, how can countries' forecasted growth be sustained when consumption growth is driven by people at the upper end of the income distribution, while the economies are failing to create jobs for new entrants, for youth, but also for those that are going to be displaced by increasing global fragmentation and the introduction of AI? Thank you.
We as an institution, we have always been advocating for prudent fiscal policy that contributes to lifting up living standards across the board. And we do believe that an economy, a society would do better when people across the board feel included and feel that their voice is heard. Certainly we have seen the distance between the top and the bottom growing. Part of it is not a bad thing. It means that there is innovation that creates very high return on investment, and we don't want this to go away. But part of it, and I have shown it in the graph in the United States, undermining intergenerational equality, that's not good. So societies have to look into this, look into the mirror and say, do I really like what I see? And then there are policy measures that can correct this picture. And then you have people with more capacity to pay higher taxes, to consume more, a virtuous circle that is good for everybody. Just to add one point here, what we have been recommending is to think of incentives for entrepreneurship at all levels. And I want to repeat something I said before, especially SMEs, especially startups, because then you not only get people to be better off, but you increase more of this entrepreneurial potential that drives the economy upward.
Well, let's take one more.
Can I say, sorry, one
Sure.
more thing? And also get people to work longer. we had a very interesting study at the fund. It says that today a 70-year-old has the cognitive capacity of a 53-year-old 2 decades ago. So to those of us that belong to a particular segment, hey, we are smarter, we can work longer.
So let's take one more question.
Do we have 1 more hour? I mean, in short.
The question,
Yeah.
for those that didn't, was a focus on Latin America.
Yeah.
And Kristalina has said it would probably take an hour, but she's going to make it shorter.
So Latin America is a part of the world economy that, on the whole, has been performing below potential for quite some time. And I am always expecting that there would be a spark that would unleash everywhere in Latin America the growth potential that is there. So there are a couple of things that are obvious. One is the world is changing very rapidly. Take advantage of this change. Take advantage of the reshaping of global supply chains to look at what is self-inflicted injury, and there is plenty in quite a number of countries. Get rid of it. There is no tolerance anymore for being kind of slow on the uptake. And 3, put in motion this incredible dynamism that you perform when you dance into your economic activities.
Or on the soccer football field.
Or on the soccer football. I mean, that is, and again, I don't want to sound negative, because of course there is a lot good, and Latin America has been resilient in this world of shock after shock after shock. But I think you can lift up your eyes and say, yeah, we aim higher, we do better.
So, Kristalina, one, thank you for our roadmap. We're sit here in the Hall of Dreams, as you referred to it, and your leadership in the IMF will hopefully make the dreams of billions of people on the planet come true. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you.